Hello everybody, my name's James, and for the benefit of those listening back to the audio, you're listening to Ask James, my regular YouTube live stream, where I welcome questions from the YouTube community on anything football related. Yes, it's Ask James on a Wednesday. Obviously we would normally do the Clayton and James show today, but Clayton is in Milan. He'll obviously be in the San Siro tonight watching Arsenal against Inter Milan. So the Clayton and James show will be on Friday, so a little switcheroo for you this week. To timestamp this, it is just gone 12 on Wednesday, November the 6th. I've got no particular announcements to go through, so I'll cover questions up to 1 p.m. UK time or before if I get through all of the questions. Jake Horror is first. Says, hi James, plan on wildcarding game week 12. What do you make of Isak, Cunha and Welbeck front three? Thinking of having a high price forward rather than free cheaper. Yeah, I'm very much kind of as per yesterday's podcast on the Wish J, the five forwards between Watkins and Dominic Solanke's price level. Would be very keen for everybody to have at least one of those five players. I'm not keen on the free cheaper. Just from a structure perspective moving forward, I mean, if you look at game week 12, Watkins has got Palace at home, Isak's got West Ham at home, Jackson goes to Leicester, Havertz has got Forest at home. So you've got four there with really good fixtures in game week 12. And the one that's got the bad fixture in game week 12 has the best fixture this week, which is Dominic Solanke at home to Ipswich. So I'm very keen for people to have one in that area. I completely get it at the moment. There are so many at Cunha, Wood, and even below Brighton players, Larson, Visser, all really good options. Just from a structure perspective, I'd be keen for people to have at least one, because the chances are if you go with a free cheaper, as I've said several times, you'll end up with something like Salah, Palmer, Saka, Bumo, and you're not going to sell any of them players to fund the money to upgrade your forwards. So you could get stuck. That's my fear for people. I'm keen to have at least two of them. I've got three at the moment and may well be sticking on that strategy with three of them as well. I'm kind of wavering at the moment in terms of what I'm going to do with Mo Salah, whether I'm going to force him in, which I may well do, or whether I just continue to take it on. So yeah, I'm keen on that price bracket of forwards. I think they've largely all coming into pretty decent fixtures. I've stressed my concern about Watkins and the midweek of game week 14, where I feel like he could get a rest. But game week 15, he might be the best captaincy if he does get that rest. Jackson's obviously on the four yellows. Isak's fixture's pretty good, bar Liverpool at home in game week 14, but at least you know that him in that midweek set of fixtures will play. Solanke's fixtures are indifferent once you get beyond this game week, and I think Arsenal come back into good fixtures for a really long sustained period from game week 12. So yeah, I'm keen for people to have at least one of those forwards. Cunha, completely get it. The only thing I'd say with Matthias Cunha is, like, if he's in now, great. I'd be loath to be putting him in specifically in game week 12 if I'd missed the Southampton game. Brighton's fixtures come back great from game week 12 onwards, although it starts with a challenge away to Bournemouth. I think Bournemouth in 12 away and Fulham away in 14 are deceptively hard fixtures. And Brighton do actually have 3 out of 4 away games from game week 12 onwards. But yeah, Danny Welbeck, if he stays fit, started every game for Brighton so far this season, which is a plus. Maybe means X injury is due with him, but he's doing really well. So from a structure perspective, Jake, like, I don't mind it at all. I'd just be really keen that you have at least one of the Wish J set of forwards, and for me, ideally probably two personally. But the structure, that's fine. You'll be close enough. Cunha to Solanke is not a huge jump. Ricky Young says, regretting my move to sell Solanke for Darwin Nunez last week. Plan to move Darwin on game week 12 to Isak with a double transfer. Should I hold this week and hope he starts, or take a -4 and move now? I mean, it's almost certain he'll come back into the team. He's obviously had a bit of a rest last night. Arne Slot played Luis Diaz up front, but he did suggest in his post-match comments that was very much a one-off strategic move, specifically for Bayer Leverkusen and particularly Jonathan Tah. So I would imagine Nunez starts back through the middle against Villa. My only thing on that is, like, if he does well in this week, it's kind of not like a FOMO. It's like a hindsight. If Nunez does well this week, and then Jota's not available for 12, and then Nunez has got Southampton away in 12, do you really want to sell Nunez at that point? That's one of the reasons why I avoided it. But I also didn't mind it for people who wanted to take a punt. But I also said that I thought it was a specific good case for people who were wildcarding in game week 12, as say Jake, the previous questioner, is obviously looking at doing. So no, you've taken that path. I mean, to move him back out from -4 when he's got a home fixture this week and Liverpool are so strong at home. No, I wouldn't be taking a -4 to move it out personally. If that's your biggest fire this week, Ricky, you're probably in a better position than many for this week, I would suggest. USF 1324 says, morning lads. Sorry, just me, no Suj. Neil Grover says, hey man, looking forward to chatting later. Likewise, Neil's obviously our Bournemouth correspondent. I'll be recording with him and Tom Med tonight for tomorrow's Clash of Correspondents between Brentford and Bournemouth. I think two teams really on radar. Bournemouth now coming to a really good run of fixtures. And Semenyo tempts, doesn't he? We'll certainly talk about him with Neil on tomorrow's Clash of Correspondents. Zuby says, good afternoon, mate. Who would you replace Calvert-Lewin with? Larsson, Welbeck or Evan Nilsson, another Bournemouth option? Or possibly someone else you think can be a good replacement? 5.9 and below. Thanks and keep up the great content. Despite concerns about Manchester City, and I think me and Clates will talk City on Friday's Clayton and James show, I wouldn't particularly want to be buying Welbeck, I think, this week, about to play them. And you'd be really scared about it if he did get an unlikely England call, which I don't expect him to get, although some would certainly say his form would maybe merit. Fixtures, as said, good from 12, but it is then 3 out of 4 away. I think if I was going this moment, I'd be attacking the fixture right in front of my face. So despite the fact that I said on Monday's podcast, I have a suspicion Southampton might win at Wolves. I probably would be going Larsson. It's maybe the move that I'd still make. So for me personally, Zuby, if I was buying one of them 3 forwards right now this game week, I'd still attack Larsson in front of me with the view to, if it doesn't work over the next 3 or 4, maybe onto Welbeck or João Pedro, maybe sort of like game week 15, for example, if I wanted to be in and around that structure. So if I was buying one of them right now, I would chance Larsson. Neil Grover's in again. He says, we have had some great surprise teams this year so far. Nottingham Forest, Fulham, Bournemouth, and perhaps less good Wolves, West Ham, Manchester United. What has been your biggest surprise so far this season? Biggest surprise? Erik ten Hag made it through 9 game weeks. No, I jest somewhat. It's got to be Forest, isn't it, I think Neil, Fulham and Bournemouth, we probably would attract as being kind of the almost the best 2 from the expected bottom half. So in terms of league position, we're not miles away from that. I think both teams doing really well at the moment. I think actually particularly your Neil's team, as we'll cover, have had a tough run of fixtures, so doing great actually. But yeah, Forest has to be the biggest surprise. They have had the best set of fixtures, I think, of all teams across the first 10. But even in the difficult games, have obviously performed pretty well. So I think Forest has to be the biggest surprise. I think I'd openly admit, if you'd have pinned me for which manager I thought might be first to go, I would have arguably said Nuno in the summer. Pretty sure I probably did. So that has surprised. It's done exceptionally well. For Nottingham Forest to lose 1 out of 10 Premier League games, irrespective of the fixtures, is a brilliant return. Just under 2 points per game is great. So Forest have to be the biggest surprise so far. They've done extremely well. They do now hit the bottom of my ticker, admittedly, for a number of weeks. But it has to be Forest as the biggest surprise so far. And a positive for the league, them as a football club, well-supported club. It's nice. Tom Reynolds says, hi James, happy hump day, or is it unhappy Trump day? How much of the US election did you follow? I guess for me, like many, I'm sure many of you probably would have followed it. We've already recorded Tottenham for our patrons today that will be out this afternoon. Suj said he didn't sleep much because he'd been up watching it last night. I was following some of the chat on social media before I went to bed, and it seemed, I wouldn't say clear, but quite early projections were suggesting quite quickly that obviously Trump was going to win. So to wake up to that news this morning wasn't a huge surprise. Have I followed it? No, not particularly. Am I surprised? No, not particularly. Suj and I have agreed that we're going to do money in politics on Patreon next Thursday rather than money in football, because I know he's quite keen to discuss some of the matters. More one for Suj to discuss. He follows it much closer than me. So we're going to do a little bit of a Patreon podcast on it next week. Demetrius G says, who gets more points? Game week 12, 15 out of Watkins and Isak. Well... On the fixtures there across those 4, I have a slight preference for Watkins. But if Watkins doesn't start that game week 14 fixture, arguably changes it. I think the big difference between the two of them is, I think those two home games that Watkins has in 14 and 15, he is captainable, particularly if you're on a strategy like me without Haaland. So I think despite what I just said about Nottingham Forest, I think Haaland at home to Nottingham Forest in game week 14 is probably the best captaincy option. Arsenal got Manchester United at home. It's obviously going to be Amram's Manchester United, so it's difficult to judge at this moment in time, this far out. Tottenham go to Bournemouth. It's not great. Maybe Palmer at Southampton could also be a rest, though, as a midweek set of fixtures. Chelsea have Villa away and Tottenham away, either side of... Villa at home and Tottenham away, either side of that fixture with Southampton. So, but 15 at home to Southampton... I think if Watkins has had, if I've still got and Watkins has had the rest against 14 in 14, he gets the armband for me in 15. Whereas most others, you know how the trends go, right? It'll be like, oh, he got benched. Oh, do I need to sell him? Well, no, if he's got the rest in 14, he'll be back in against Southampton. And then that probably is the outstanding captaincy that week. City go to Crystal Palace. Liverpool go to Everton. It's the psychological of the Merseyside derby. Chelsea are at Tottenham. So Watkins at home to Southampton in 15. Manchester United have Nottingham Forest at home. That one really probably does appeal, actually. Arsenal go to Fulham isn't great either. So Watkins at home to Southampton. I keep thinking that. I'm very suspicious that he gets that rest in the Brentford game in 14. But then I can't captain him in 15, I think, if he's had that rest. And that's because, said several times over, Watkins plays Chelsea on the Sunday, then it's Brentford on the Wednesday, Southampton Saturday, and then they go to Leipzig on the Tuesday. Where does Watkins get that rest? He probably, with John Duran there, he's probably not going to start all four of them games. And as kind of seen again, I should have mentioned it more on Monday's podcast, but Watkins and Duran together doesn't work unless Villa are chasing for a goal. And I know it was at 1-1 that Duran came on Sunday, but it just opened up the midfield for them. Not in a good way. So if they're chasing, and particularly at Villa Park, the two of them together, otherwise it's one or the other. And Watkins clearly going to continue to have favouritism. I imagine Duran plays one of them too. I'm very nervous about game week 14. You know, I think there's a lot of assets could end up with a rest that way, and I mean popular assets. I'm quite nervous about it. So to answer your question, I think factoring in maybe a captaincy for Watkins in 15, that would level out a benching. So still probably Watkins. I'm keen on Isak. One of the problems for me, I think, if I go for Salah this week, which I can get to for free, and I regret not doing it last week, he's going to cut me off of Isak. And one of the reasons I didn't do it last week was it cut me off of Isak. West Ham might have a different manager when they go to Newcastle in game week 12. That'll just throw it up in the air, maybe, in terms of wanting to go there. So I think probably on the fixtures, it's just Watkins. There's 3 home games there, and they're all attractive. Palace, Brentford, Southampton. Although I do think we'll see improvement in Palace defensively now they've got the back 3 settled together. So I think Watkins, to answer the question, but very close between the two. Next up is Adam Cooper. Says, hi James, would you move Foden to Bruno Fernandes this week? Then Bruno Fernandes to Saka in 14, or hold Foden this week and sell him for Saka next week? Yeah, well, I mean, the problem for me in terms of selling Salah is it would be Saka that goes. But I've already suffered one week where I kind of expected little from Saka and let Salah points go, and I'm concerned about doing it again. It might be me cutting myself off of Saka for a while, and it means coming back maybe for Havertz possibly if I let him go. As said earlier in the week, I think punting pretty much any Manchester United player over the next 3 is perfectly reasonable. Leicester at home, Ipswich away, Everton at home. Like, if you can't punt a United player now, when can you? Now, I've got Garnacho, so there's possibly a little bit of influence in my answer there to say, no, would Saka, because Forest, it's still at home, and then West Ham away, if they haven't resolved their issues, is still absolutely fine as well. Does Fernandes definitively outscore that to make it worthwhile? An additional transfer? Thoughts on Foden at Brighton? Did score a goal last night. A little bit of question marks on the goalkeeper, perhaps, on that. I think if it was me, I'd just set up for Saka, I think, in 12 rather than taking the Bruno punt. But it's absolutely fine to do so if you would prefer to do that. I think it's absolutely fine. Ricky Young says, what's your thoughts on free hitting this week? Target 3, Spurs, United, Liverpool and Wolves. Do you think this will be needed later in the season? I get it. Like, if you've got nothing from those teams, fine. And particularly in the case of United, like, look, there's 2 good fixtures afterwards as well. For Wolves, the good fixtures continue. Liverpool go to Southampton in 12. So, other than Spurs, you probably want players from these teams going into game week 12, I would guess as well. On free hit later in the season, here's something to think about. And we spoke about this a little bit on the Clayton and James show last week. So, the projection now for the Carabao Cup final, which clashes with game week 29, would be an Arsenal-Liverpool final as it stands. Now, in that game week, it's the reverse of this weekend's coming fixtures. So Liverpool go to Aston Villa and Arsenal host Chelsea. Those are 2 games that would be postponed under that circumstance. Now, that is 4 popular teams. I mean, for me now, that would just absolutely decimate my team basically under that circumstance. I'm trying to. I think I'd be without 8, more than half my team. Now, obviously, it's game week 29, so we don't have to worry about that now. But my point being is, in terms of covering your team at that point, if those are the 2 games postponed, it might be that that's very suitable for you to free hit in that week. And I'll give you a further reason why. Forgive me if the screen's just gone a little bit bright. I'm just going to remind myself of the fixtures for those teams either side, because Liverpool in game week 27 have Southampton at home and Leicester at home. So there's every chance you're going to want a Liverpool treble up. Then they go to Arsenal in 29 and that game may get postponed. Now, Arsenal, the fixture's not quite so great beforehand. Sorry, I tell a lie on Liverpool. They don't have Southampton at home in 28, Newcastle at home in 27. It's Chelsea has Southampton at home and Leicester at home. Crystal Palace, Aston Villa have decent fixtures either side of a potential play. If you took the Liverpool fixture out, I mean, Villa's fixtures would look brilliant for such a long-term period, bar a home game with Chelsea in game week 26. Their fixtures are great either side. So, the point being is, if that eventuality did happen, and listen, those 2 teams could play each other in the semi-final, they could both get eliminated, but that would be the projection of the final. That's 4 big teams would be missing from that game week. Now, and with good fixtures either side, particularly in the case of Liverpool, Chelsea especially, and Villa a long sustained period. So it might be, although we'd rather use a free hit in a more offensive week, like a double game week, it might be that that's just the best cover for your team. Now, if you sell that idea to yourself, that removes free hit for me in any week between now until we got more information. Just on that basis alone. Because the idea, you could say, oh, using it as a shield, you should go aggressive in a double. Yeah, but if you've got all those assets either side of that week, then that's going to be really strong for you. And it might just be that that's the way it lands, and therefore the free hit should be used in that blank game week this week. City have got, obviously, it's the reverse fixtures. So City have got Brighton at home that week. I have an inkling that Tottenham don't have Ipswich away in that week. Sorry, I'm gonna double check that again. But other teams in that game week 29. So City have Brighton at home. Tottenham go to Fulham actually that week. So it's not an exact repeat of the fixtures. That's not great. But Newcastle got Palace at home. United go to Leicester in that game week. So there are other things that you can attack, right? And you might just want to protect that week. So I would bear that in mind. On that basis alone, that's not to say I would be committed to free hitting in that week. But with that information right now, that would mean for me any consideration of a free hit in any week coming forward at the moment would just be completely off the table for me. And if it works out that, hey, we don't need to use the free hit in that week because maybe the Carabao Cup final will be something that's less relevant, Tottenham against Newcastle, for example, it doesn't matter, then fine. Then attack one of the doubles or attack a different game week. So for me at the moment, free hit at any point in this period coming up would be a no. And Ricky, in your own personal case, mate, I think you'd be attacking 3 teams that have still got decent fixtures following this game week. So it would be a strong no from me, mate. Hope that helps. Birth Media says, hi, James. Hope you're well, mate. How much are you selling your team for? I think Daniel Levy wants about 4 billion, mate. He says, jokes aside, top 3 differential captains for the next 3 game weeks. Okay. Well, Dominic Solanke is not going to be a differential captain now this week, is he? Because people are steaming back in now. Oh, he got the goals, did he? I guess this week, one that will have very low ownership would be Rasmus Haaland, maybe. Home to Leicester would be an option. I guess Brennan Johnson will fall under that differential category. I guess Bruno Fernandes will as well. The 2 Wolves forwards. Although I guess Cunha has quite a bit of decent ownership now within the community. Game week 12 is really difficult to pick differential captains because the outstanding players in the game, the 4 big hitters, if you will, as they currently are, in Haaland at home to Tottenham, Salah away to Southampton, Palmer away to Leicester, and Saka at home to Forest are all really good. That I don't know how you pick at least one of them 4, I think, in game week 12 as it stands. So for me, it would probably be Palmer. It's perfectly reasonable. Then 13 swings back. It might even be that Bumo is the outstanding captaincy in game week 13 at home to Leicester, but obviously not a differential. So maybe Johan Visser. Haaland again, perhaps, at home to Everton. Brighton players at home to Southampton. I don't know if I can call Chris Wood a differential. His ownership might suggest such. But I think within the community, his ownership is pretty good now. But he has Ipswich at home in game week 13. I guess a player like that for captaincy is still differential enough. So 11 and 13, there's a few options. I mean, game week 12, you're going to go with one of the big hitters, aren't you? Hasselbank, and no, I'm not selling my team, mate. Hasselbank win says, James, what are your thoughts when you watch Marcus Rashford, especially when he's supposed to track back? Screams laziness, and this has been going on for years. So, it's a good question. I highlighted a game that he particularly had at Newcastle last year, where Newcastle won 1-0. Anthony Gordon scored the goal, and Newcastle were excellent on the night. Manchester United were really poor. And although the score was only 1-0, Newcastle were far superior to that eventual scoreline. And Marcus Rashford regularly didn't track Tino Livramento, and we highlighted it because there were other occasions where he did. And that's a bad one. We highlighted a couple of scenarios where he was sprinting to get back because his awareness of what was going on around him just simply wasn't there. And therefore, there must have been a duty for him to do it. Let's give you a different example here. So think about Heung-min Son's goal against West Ham, where there's a turnover, and in transition, Sarr plays the ball out quickly to Heung-min Son, and because West Ham were in possession, Wan-Bissaka was pushing up the pitch. Now, the ball breaks to Son, and obviously Wan-Bissaka, through no fault of his own, is massively out of position. Son carries the ball and obviously goes on and scores. Son's cheating. He might have been being lazy in that moment. He might have been fatigued because, remember, he came off shortly afterwards. But he was probably in that moment cheating, allowing for this eventuality. And I think we have to be careful with players when we speak about narratives, because sometimes we need to consider about cheating, right? Eden Hazard was an extremely good player for this. Used to cheat. Used to stay in positions where he'd let a fullback go. Chelsea would funnel off to allow him to stay in a higher and wider position, which obviously allowed him the space. If they won it back, he could go and attack and hurt the opposition. Son's a case of that. And I do think when I watched the game against Chelsea at the weekend, it felt like Rashford's positioning was more like that. There was intention to cheat, particularly in the first half where you've got Malo Gusto playing from right back and going into kind of right-sided 10/half space positions. United didn't want Rashford to follow Gusto in there. Now, Gusto's leaving himself exposed, where then on transition, you're asking, obviously, Fofana, who's a good 1v1 defender, to then basically go out into the right-back position and deal with Rashford if there was a quick turnover. So, on that particular instance at the weekend, I would say it's not laziness. I would say it was under tactical instruction. But I have seen that in the past, as per the reference to that Newcastle game from last season, where it definitely was laziness. So we have to be careful with that. So it could be that sometimes players don't track back because it's under tactical instruction. I think Sunday was a case of that. But yeah, on the whole, in terms of him, he's not really been at it for some time. As Gary Robinson said when he came on the Fan View last week, like, he's streaky, isn't he? He'll go on a little run at some point this season, then he'll go cold again, probably. Demetrius G says, what's your ideal game with 12 wildcard? Difficult to answer off the cuff because I haven't thought about it too much. But Fabianski would be the 4.0 goalkeeper. I think that's clear. I would probably go down a route at that stage of one of 3 goalkeepers, and it would depend on budget and what else doing, but one of probably Raya, Sanchez or Verbruggen. Defensively, I would want Gabriel. I think I would probably put Konate in there now, rather than Trent. I had a look at the XG for defenders last night, and Trent isn't on page 1. Yeah. But he's still capable at any time. But I think if I was wildcard in 12, he probably doesn't go in. And I might sacrifice Trent this week as part of Salah. Possibly, I haven't decided yet. I think Lewis Hall would go in. I'd possibly stick with Wout Fass as my 4.0 because I've got a little bit of value in that. And I probably don't deem it necessary to have 5 good defenders. Fass would ordinarily just sit as the 15th player, if you will. 8 Nori, subject to how this week goes. If it was United, I'd want to go in this week, so I'd probably leave that. Back into Villa, I think Luca Dean might be a name we speak about quite a bit after this week. Milos Kerkez is another name, so I'd be looking to take away from that, but I'd want to keep at least, similar to the structure with the forwards, I'd want to keep at least one at that defensive value. And I also think Konate gives coverage of Liverpool, and also it's not too far. It's close to Porro, it's kind of close to Saliba, it's close to Vardy, and obviously Gabriel keep within sort of a million valuation of Trent as well, if it was deemed necessary to go back there, where you could go Gabriel to Trent and Konate down to Joachim Anderson, whatever. Joachim Anderson's another one, but I do think Fulham's fixtures up to Christmas after game week 12 get a bit tougher. Then they've got a really good run actually in the new year. So if I was looking at a longer term, someone to play kind of up till Christmas and then Anderson on the other side, I might look at that combination, but I'd probably take Fass out, and Anderson would actually arguably be my 5th under that circumstance. Would feel a bit early to put a player like that in based on something that happens in the new year, but Fulham also a reliable team. There's a kind of cluster of ideas. I probably wouldn't be on Vardy going into Tottenham and Liverpool. Midfield, I mean Salah, Saka, Palmer, Bumo. With a caveat to that, Bumo's now at 0.9. If he hits 8, that's got to top out, hasn't it? And I was analysing their fixtures last night from game week 14 onwards, where we know that they get tougher. I was actually analysing their fixtures basically up until the March international break. And once you get these next 3 out of the way, it gets a lot tougher. And it'll be a brave person who sells him, but it'd still be a mad one to take on in 12. If I was wildcarding in 12, the value I've got in him is game. But I'd genuinely be looking at maybe moving that on in game week 14, possibly. But I think that's the ideal 4, isn't it? Salah, Saka, Palmer, Bumo. Then it's take your pick of Rodgers, Semenyo, or whether you want something like a Diblin. Up front, for me, I would want at least 2 of the 3. Wish J forwards, as said before. I think timing-wise, it would probably be Watkins, Jackson. And either Isak with that, or if the money doesn't allow, and there's every chance it won't, then I possibly would chance Danny Welbeck at that point, I think. That's a rough idea. I've got no idea how close that is to value, but I don't think that's a million miles off. Fan Maggie says, hello, mate. Hello. Ross Cordingley says, Solanke triple captaincy wink. We can confirm that he has travelled to Turkey, which should come as no surprise for Tottenham's game against Galatasaray tomorrow. And I do think he'll play. I do think he'll play the majority of the game. But as long as he comes through unscathed, yes, that's who I'm going to captain this week. Triple captaincy, definitely not. CM Punk 2310 says, hey James, would you downgrade Raya to Sanchez, play Fabianski this week to upgrade DCL to Cunha? Yeah, I'd be tempted. The problem with me, I've looked at this move a few times. It's something very similar. I've looked at moving Raya to Sanchez or Verbruggen. Play Flappy this week, and then the opposite keeper's kind of good to go from game week 12 onwards. But there's a psychological for me where I feel I committed to double Arsenal defence, and I committed on it as a really long-term strategy, knowing
that over this period, sort of 8 to 11, was going to be really, really difficult. Now, it's not helped that they conceded goals to Leicester and Southampton 6 and 7, right? So I've had nothing out of Raya and Gabriel over this period. It's like we're at the end now. There's only one more game and then it gets good. I keep thinking about that. You could just go DCL to Larson, is the reality here. Now, I definitely think, and I've stuck to this feeling all the way through, that Cunha is worth the extra over Larson. But I've also said that I think it's very dependent on your structures. And I wouldn't be forcing Cunha in over Larson to make that sort of thing happen, would be my inkling at this moment. And if we get forward another 4 or 5 weeks and that's clearly not working with Raya, then sure, downgrade it. Mr. Tool says, any idea if the number of pens is down compared to this time last year? Factually, I don't know, but I'm going to presume yes. I would be very surprised if it's not, but I don't know the numbers. Colin Johnson says, hi James, hope you're well, mate. Best 5 million under defenders. Okay, let's give you a few. Mazraoui, rather than Martinez, because Martinez on 4 yellow cards, I can't go there. I could go Trent to Martinez and Saka to Salah. But I can't really, because if Martinez, Aït-Nouri and Jackson all got booked this week, then I'm looking at an absolute disaster. So, I mean, I'm carrying 2 on 4 yellows. I can't carry another one. So, Mazraoui for me on that basis. Aït-Nouri is clearly the Wolves one. Sepp Vandenberg is the 4.0 to go to. Although, as mentioned, with Brentford, fixtures get tougher from 14. I like Kirkes now. Lewis Hall was mentioned. That's probably the limit of where I'd look. Anderson as a long-term one, maybe, as mentioned. And I think from next week to Chelsea guys. But it would be Colwell or Fofana rather than Reece James. Hanny says, hi James, starting game week 12-ish, would you prefer a combo of Gabriel in defence with Welbeck in attack, or Jackson Isak in attack with Mykolenko in defence? Well, Everton's fixtures get pretty shit now, actually. Like West Ham away is not great for the defensive guys. United away in 13 is not great for the defensive guys. So you're left with Brentford at home, questionable in 12, Wolves at home 14, and then there's a disastrous run of fixtures from game week 15 for Everton up to 18. Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Man City. They played the top 4 in a row, basically. With apologies to Nottingham Forest listeners and viewers. But the expected top 4, let's say. You don't want to play Mykolenko through that, mate. So, by default, it's the opposite option with Gabriel, mate. Jerry Darmiu says, hi, James. After last game week, who's in more pressure to perform between O'Neill and Lopetegui? If both continue to underperform, who gets sacked first and why? Well, without trying to spoil the Patreon podcast for our patrons too much later, which is available for basic plus tier patrons as well today. Suj very much thinks that if West Ham lose on Saturday, Lopetegui's gone. And I think if Wolves lose at the weekend, O'Neill's gone. As I've said, I have an inkling that Wolves might get beat at the weekend. I don't think West Ham will. But they're both very quickly under pressure. I mean, O'Neill hasn't beat another Premier League team since, what was it, Clayton said on Monday's pod, March, was it? Because the only game they've won since then was against Luton in the who have obviously been relegated since, and Burnley in the Carabao Cup. Jeez, you know, at the point that Wolves lose to Southampton, if they do it at the weekend, you go, okay, right, well, you've had a couple of good home fixtures now, and yeah, this is not on now. And Suj is, unfortunately, I feel sorry for them a little bit, not that much. Suj is of the opinion that Lopetegui's is gone, pretty much. Not necessarily, no, if they win Saturday, then no, but he doesn't think it's going to work out. So both of them, and as I said, he thinks if they lose Saturday, that's probably over for him as well. James Wright says, hi James, no fires in my team this week. Is moving Vardy to Larson worth it? Already have Cunha. Having double Wolves feels a bit odd to me though. Yeah. But it's not terrible because the fixtures are decent for a good time. And listen, you can obviously keep the one that performs better for you and then chain on the other one. The only problem with that would be is where do you chain it on? But I would suggest in the case of Larson, you can chain that on to a Brighton player, I would have thought, whether that's Pedro. Welbeck might be a bit expensive maybe, but João Pedro is obviously going to become an option, I guess, really quickly. So, yeah, I'd do it. Yeah, from a Vardy perspective, yeah, it's over from the fixtures now, isn't it, really? United and Chelsea in the next two. Yeah, you're moving it on, aren't you, I think? CM Punch 2310 says, what's your opinion on the freemium structure? And then in the near term, which one of Salah, Haaland and Palmer would you predict to be sold by people to release funds? Well, it's Haaland, isn't it? It is. I was going to say it has to be. It doesn't have to be. But it will feel like it has to be. Cole Palmer, once he gets beyond this week, assuming he's fit, and we're pretty confident he is, then them fixtures for Chelsea are just too insane for too long. Haaland releases the most of it. And if you've got Palmer and Salah, you've got a viable captaincy to take on Haaland pretty much every week. There'll never be a week where both of them look really bad. They've just played each other. So, it's Haaland, unfortunately. But usual caveats that I won't repeat about him. Damien Bruns says, afternoon, James, I listened to your forwards pod, but still unsure which one to go for. I get the feeling Solanke is the preferred, but I have Johnson. With that being said, would you go Isak then? I mean, timing-wise, it's Solanke this week, isn't it? I get that completely, because actually none of the other four look great this week. If Solanke or Jackson were to get injured this midweek, I'd be buying Isak, if that's helpful to you. Jackson, it's so off-putting with the 4 yellow cards. So it depends, but I really like him as an option. I guess it depends on, can your structure carry that? With Dom, I've taken a piss a bit this week, obviously, but let's just rewind to this time last week and people were saying, what about him exactly? One game's changed everything, has it? How do you feel about Dom? Here's the thing, you buy Dom this week and he blanks against Ipswich. How do you feel? Oh, Man City away next. You're moving it on. Yeah, tough call. But that's the one to... I mean, in terms of order to buy this week, it's Solanke then Isak, I think. Solanke's ceiling, I think, is high enough this week when particularly you look at the Ipswich data. I mean, if you look at Tottenham's XG and Ipswich's XGC, you'll want to captain Solanke this week, I think, if people really want to kind of take themselves down that path. So I just consider the outcome. That's all I'd say about it. How do you feel if you get Solanke this week and he blanks? What next? Because the other four then come into better fixtures, arguably. He's the one I'd be going for, though, I think, from that. Hanny says, who would you rather go for in the coming three, Saka or Bruno? Well, I feel like I've already kind of answered that. Pretty sure I have, or very similar question anyway, Hanny, but thank you. Bogdan Milošević, sorry mate, says, James, my man, Foden to Saka or Jackson to Isak, as Jackson is on 4 yellows. Yeah, but if Jackson isn't on 4 yellows, doesn't get the 5th one, he's not a sell. So Jackson, here's the interesting thing about this with Jackson. Jackson's going to be a continued great differential for those of us who own. He's going to continue to be that because the 4 yellow cards are largely going to put people off of buying him. So I think for those of us who own, he's not a sell. He's a keep faith with at the moment. Now, if that yellow comes, and if it particularly comes this week, which it might, then yeah, but I wouldn't be selling Jackson at this minute. Foden to Saka definitely feels like more of a next week move. And of course, if Jackson then picks up the yellow, then it's Jackson to Isak next week. And by virtue of rolling a transfer, you might even be able to do both. Although I'm not sure if you will from the money perspective. But at the moment, I think Jackson is a hold till that yellow comes for those of us who own. Because that's a great differential. Jerry Darmiu says, as we all know, Thomas Frank has started to play more attacking football. Why did he play such defensive football at Fulham, considering Brentford's qualities as good as Fulham's? This is a good question. And I'm going to park it. The reason I'm going to park it is You're absolutely right. But I'm just going to park it because I know that me and Clayton are going to discuss this on Friday's Clayton and James show. But yeah, I was pretty disappointed with Brentford. At the same time, they really limited Fulham in terms of the actual good chances they had in that second half. But Brentford were disappointing in terms of what they were offensively all through the game. And were nothing like what I've been telling you all that they are becoming. And I thought even more so the fact that it was on a television game was really surprising. But I'm going to park that because we'll discuss that game more on Friday's Clayton and James show. And obviously Tom Med is on Clash of Correspondents tomorrow as well. Hunter Serin says, James, you're the man. Like and subscribe, folks. Yeah, thank you, mate. Smash a like, hit the sub button if you're watching, guys. Doesn't cost anything. If you're listening back to the audio, a 5-star review goes a really long way, people. FPL Maggot says, hi, James. I guess you're going to Turkey. If so, stay safe and keep up the great work. We love you. I'm not going, mate, so I'm not going to die. I don't think I'd have died anyway. No, I'm not going. Did look at it. Hell. Not as in Turkey, the place, or Galatasaray even, but it's brutal what the Tottenham fans are actually being asked to do in terms of their travel. So they basically got to get a coach from somewhere in Istanbul, like 4 hours before the game, that will take them to the stadium. The journey is it's estimated at 1 to 2 hours. They'll get held in the ground for up to 90 minutes afterwards, then got to do that same coach journey back. So all in all, the experience, you've got to get there first. The experience is going to be something that's like 10 hours or so just for the football match. I really hope that we get a change. Can I say that? Had it been an 8 o'clock kickoff, I might have done it. But the fact it's an earlier would have meant I had to go today. And you wouldn't have this content now for starters. I really hope something changes with the way that British fans, and I guess not just British fans, but I don't know the perspective, but the way away fans are treating off this island in away games in Europe is largely disgusting. And I really hope that good supporters groups like the Football Associations, the Football Supporters Association, and their I think it's ESA, maybe European Support Association. I think something has to be done in terms of, unless you've done an away game abroad, you won't understand what I'm saying. But you are treated in most places like a criminal before you've done anything. You normally have to watch games from behind, like some form of fencing or Perpex glass or netting. You nearly always put in kind of the worst places in the stadium, etc. You are treated to the sort of thing where you get ferried to stadiums. It's not the case everywhere. And actually, the more high profile the venues, the better this is. But yeah, if it was like this here, people wouldn't travel in the same way. Imagine my boy wanted to go. He doesn't, right? I'd be like, there's no way I'm taking you, mate. And I think if you're ever at that point where you're going, I wouldn't take my family somewhere. It's 2024. It shouldn't be like that. Like, my hope would be that the people of Istanbul are really good and you could feel safe. And that doesn't mean you have to go around and sing Tottenham songs on the streets of Istanbul and stuff like that. But can you be trusted to make your own way to a football stadium and stuff? Yeah, I spoke about this on one of our Patreon pods recently. And I'm going to reflect probably on that next week and see what some of the stories of what some of the Tottenham fans are saying. They had a less, not as bad an experience, but something similar when we played in Ferencváros as well, picking up tickets in the middle of a rain in the park and then getting ferried on a coach to the stadium, which was like less than a 5-minute drive, but you had to do it. It's like silly. Come on, man. It's 2024, guys. But I do realise as well that there's a lot of people that ruin it for everybody else, unfortunately. I do get that as well. No, I'm not going. I will be at Ibrox in December. And you know what? Won't have to go through any of that. Demetrius G says, if you cheap out the defence, you can get Salah, Saka, Palmer, Bumo and a premium forward. Thanks. I completely get that people want to go that midfield 4 and then, yes, one of the 7.5s, 8s. Can you get the 2? Here's the problem. What about when Arsenal start putting them really good defensive numbers up? Liverpool's shown capability. Remember, both those two teams were really difficult fixtures recently. It's not beyond reason I end up in a position in the longer term that's double Arsenal defence and double Liverpool defence. And You struggle to get to that. My fear is you're absolutely right about those 4 players. We'd all want all of those 4 players. Selling any single one of them is going to be really tough. You're cutting yourself off of so many players. My strategy has never been to cut myself off of Salah. I cut myself off of one player, Erling Haaland, in my structure. That is it. Just one player. And ironically, actually, the minute I put Salah in my team, Haaland is back on the table. As long as I keep Watkins, interestingly. And then every player is available to me. That, you go that midfield, you are cutting yourself off of all of your Trents, Gabriels, Vardios, and then obviously your Haaland, Watkins, etc. Too many to cut yourself off of, in my opinion, if that's what it leads to. But of course, yes, it's the midfield 4 we'd all want. The template, as I said on Monday, it will change again. And as I've also said, I think it will be a very brave person that sells Brian Boomer in game week 14. And that allows them other 3 a little bit better. Because then if you then end up with like Rodgers or Semenyo and one cheaper, guess what you can do? You can still have one of the Gabriels or something like that defensively. Jerry Darmiu says, is capping Mo at home to Villa way better choice than Haaland at Brighton with how unstoppable Liverpool are at the moment, and Haaland seems to forget how to score. Haaland any place, any time, but the streak that Mo is on at the moment, I probably would captain Mo over him as it stands this week. Brighton a good side as well. Not that Villa aren't, by the way, but you saw them crumble over a little period there in the second half. Now, I do think that there'll be lessons learnt from that, which will probably help them this weekend. But look what Liverpool did in that second half last night against a very good opponent. Jerry says, who would you bench between Brennan? I mean, definitely not Brennan Johnson. Wood and Semenyo. Start 2, bench 1. So we've got Semenyo at Brentford. Wood is Newcastle at home. Form strong enough. I'd be benching Semenyo from that, mate. Definitely ain't benching Brennan Johnson this week, mate. Matt Maher says, hi James, missed the Cunha rise. Now Vardy to Cunha, 0.1 off. I have 2 free transfers, so downgrade Konsa to Hall, Kirkes, Vandenberg, etc. Or go Strand, roll the other to sell Haaland and spread the funds. Have Trent, Lewis, Ray and 8 Nori. Well, if you just sell Haaland, we're talking about a very different game for you, Matt. And it sounds like you're tempted to do it. You're asking the wrong person. Because I like structures more without Haaland. Nathan Joblin says, for Spurs, which past players in each position would you think would fit in really well to the current team setup? Fullbacks would really struggle. I guess Cole Walker elements, maybe, but not as wild as where Porro goes. Probably not. Danny Rose might have surprised, as a left back. He might have been able to do it, actually. Modric, Dembele, get into any team. Particularly Jan Vertonghen of the centre-backs. Ledley, of course, as well. More so than Toby Alderweireld. Toby was just an outstanding defender. Offensively, difficult, right? Because the game's changed so much. I mean, the majority of the good forwards still, so Kane, obviously. Berbatov would have struggled because of the work that's, Solanke's so good at the work off the ball. Although Burbs, when his back was against the wall, would put the shift in. I think someone like Aaron Lennon, actually, would, in terms of that holding the touchline, the ability to beat someone on the outside, the concern with him would have been the delivery. Bale, obviously, doesn't need to be spoken about. There's a number of options for you there, mate. Alex MJ87 says, hi, James, would you sell Haaland for Solanke? But only if that money is then allowing me to put something else very powerful in, and I don't think I'd be rushing towards Palmer or Saka this week. Presumably you're doing that to do something with that money. Like, what is that? Is that, I'm not fussed about Palmer this week. I'll get him next week. All right, fine. But at this very moment, I presume the majority of people who sell Haaland will be doing it to buy Salah, I presume. And under that circumstance, it's not just about Haaland to Solanke, is it? So I'm going to say yes. But please don't misinterpret that as, I think Solanke is better than Haaland. No, of course not. Steamroller says, hello, legend. What do you think about Nottingham Forest? How much goals will they concede against big teams in the next 7-10 games? Not as many as the fixtures might suggest, I would say to you. Because I think that the elements of the good Wolves team that Nuno had, they're there. And nobody really give them a slapping. And I don't expect any of the upcoming teams to particularly give Forest a slapping. But I would expect when they go to Arsenal, they lose like 2-0. And they go to City and they lose 2-0. And they go to Man United and lose 1-0 or 2-1. Like, that's probably where we're at with them. But the fixtures are bad enough that I wouldn't be, as said on Monday's pod, I would not be chasing Nottingham Forest assets at this stage. That doesn't mean that people who own should sell. Newcastle at home is perfectly reasonable this week, but I'm not going to go chasing that now. Despite the fact, and this will happen, every time you look at, underlying numbers for teams defensively, and you think, I want some cheaper ones, you are drawn to Nottingham Forest, and quite rightly so on what we've seen so far this season. Let's remember also, they did keep a clean sheet at Liverpool. They did only concede one at Chelsea, although probably should have been more in that one. But still, across them fixtures, I ain't chasing it. Because even if I chase it, let's be realistic. Am I starting a Forest player away to Arsenal? No. Am I starting a Forest player away to Man City? No. Am I starting a Forest player away to Manchester United? It's pretty questionable. Am I starting a Forest player at home to Villa? At home to Tottenham, 18? I ain't getting many starts. So I'm not chasing it, personally. But I don't imagine he'll do too badly. Like, if you're sitting there now with a Forest defensive asset, it's fine. Particularly if you've built up a bit of value in, say, an Olarena, for example. But yeah, you want to find the right rotations, obviously, I think, because you definitely don't want to play them away to Arsenal and Manchester City, particularly. Let's be reasonable. Next up is Damien Bruyne says, would you take Spurs winning FA Cup and Europa League if it meant Arsenal win the Prem and the UCL? Yes, mate, because I'm a Tottenham fan first before I'm an Arsenal hater. So, yes. Yeah, I would. Whatever I have to sign for Tottenham. So, if you're telling me Tottenham do a cup double this year, yeah, fine. You're in the shadow. Yeah, but that's not a bad shadow to be in, is it? Yeah, I'll 100% sign me up, mate. Sign me up. Jovan Canija says, hi, James. Thanks for game week 11. Son or Solanke for Cap. Thanks. Again, I presume, and I haven't seen, but I presume Son won't have travelled to Turkey. I haven't seen what Ange has said yet, but I didn't see him on I saw a number of players getting on the flight. Not that was like standing by the plane, if you're wondering. I've just seen videos. Didn't see Son. I don't think so. Don't imagine he'll travel. I'd be very surprised if he did. But the answer at the moment is Solanke. It is. Let's also consider with Son that his 3 goals this season have come 2 against Everton. In the Everton game, he actually started as a centre forward because remember Solanke was unavailable. And the West Ham game, he was maybe minutes from getting substituted, and I've already referenced the goal where he cheated in position, and that could still lead to returns, no doubt about it. Although Ipswich have a real bias to attack down their left-hand side rather than their right-hand side, and therefore Ben Johnson probably doesn't end up out of position like that. And think of the goals that Son's actually scored. The goal against Everton here was really great pressure, and he won the ball off Pickford. The goals against West Ham and his second against Everton both came from transition situations where players were out of position. Ipswich in the right back position probably won't, actually. There's a possibility that they don't, because they have such a bias towards Leif Davis pushing forward on the left. Now, structurally, they might do things very differently. I don't even think it's impossible that Ipswich might play a back 5 against Tottenham at the weekend. I don't think they do, because I think they'd rather stick to their principles and be more interested in the fixtures afterwards. But they could do that sort of thing. So for me, actually, no, Solanke over Son. Then we factor in that as it stands now, expected minutes for Solanke on Sunday will be 90. Even if he plays 90 on Thursday, Richarlison is going to be out for about 4 weeks. The only reason Solanke comes off early against Ipswich is if the game is absolutely dead and buried, and guess what? By that point, he's probably done the damage. Son is probably looking at 70 minutes best on Sunday as it stands. So it's Solanke from that. Next up is, I'm going to cover off 3 more. I said I'd do 1 o'clock, but yeah, we're on a roll here. Jerry Darmy says, when Arsenal fixtures swing in 12, Saka a must from that point on, considering Forest at home isn't as easy as imagined. Question, if so, is getting Isak from 12 a good move? How poor West Ham have been? That was a must, Jerry. You got the wrong show, mate. You know that from me anyway, so it's a no. On Isak, you know I'm quite keen. Salah is going to have an impact on me specifically towards Isak, possibly. And I'm aware that I could buy Salah and I'll cut off of Isak, and then Jackson gets booked this weekend, and was it worth it? Exactly. Then I'm taking the -4, aren't I? Not good. So it's never that straightforward as just buying the player. I'm trying to put the chess pieces together, guys, even though I never liked chess, actually. No, Saka's not a must. Never a must, mate. No. Damien says, great content as always. Smash the like and subscribe. Thank you. And Finley Scallon says, Haaland dibbling Delap to Isak, Salah / Cunha, Haaland for a -4, or just do the first 2 for free. So we're saying what Delap to Haaland is basically the -4 there. No. Free, yeah. Hit. Nah, probably not. Maybe playing a Tottenham that will have no Romero and no Van der Ven. He's capable. All right, guys, thanks very much. If you're watching lives or even watching back on a replay, smash a like, hit the sub button. It'd be all very much appreciated. If you want to support the show, it's www.patreon.com/Planet FPL. Includes Tottenham later today for our patrons. That's from basic plus tier and above. And for advanced tier patrons, also got the midweek FPL dilemma later today. I'll be doing kind of a deeper dive into my own FPL team at the moment. Tomorrow, in terms of your free content, it said Clash of Correspondence, Brentford versus Bournemouth with Tom Med and Neil Grover. And Clayton will be back, fingers crossed, from Milan for the Clayton and James show on Friday. Be nice to each other, everyone. Remember, play it your way. And for the benefit of those on the audio, cue music, please, man child.